So if you have any questions or anything that comes up and someone's talking or whatever, feel free to use the chat. I'll keep monitoring that as well. So welcome. I'm really excited to be with everybody. Sports clubs is a rather large part of my very large portfolio. I've done more of my job at home than I have in person, which is kind of neat. I've been really productive. But I am interested in what other people are doing with sports clubs, because at our place they are struggling and pushing. How come we can't come back? Varsity is doing stuff. How come we can't? And I'm trying to find ways to get them involved and engaged without them being back in full like they want to be. So that was one of my questions. I had a couple of other topics, but let me know what else you have and you have interest in. So how are you getting your sport clubs engaged when they can't practice as they normally would or be in our building? We just got put into gray in Ontario. We are in lockdown. Well, what passes for lockdown anyway. So I'm sort of stuck. So is there anything you're doing that would be engaging and reaching your students and anything else that's creative?
I'm in Regina. So we have not opened anything up to our clubs except our curling team because they compete youth sports. So they've actually just gotten permission and are going to start this Wednesday in training. I meet with our student leaders once a month just to connect with them, see how they're doing. A lot of them are doing some stuff either over Zoom or they've had like team suppers that I've told them I don't want to know that you're having team suppers because from my opinion, you're not in doing anything. However, I have talked to our athletic director and she's like, if they have a team supper, we have no control over it. That's them, a bunch of friends choosing to get together. And so I know they've been doing some activities in that way, but we have not been able to do anything. And I have a call with them today and I know they're going to be choked because curling's been allowed back. And the statement from our president's office was curling can go back, but I don't want to see any other applications.
Wow.
So I get to break that message to all of them tonight. So it's going to be super fun. And I get why they're upset. They just want to be back. They don't understand it. And it's hard to explain. And to be honest, our reasoning at our institution is that they don't have full-time staff coaches. I'm like, fine, I'll be there. And they're like, well, you can't go to all their practices. I'm like, it's a difference if I work from home or work from my office while they're in the gym. Like, it is what it is. We could do something to help them a little bit. That would be nice. So we'll see. That argument is going nowhere right now. So I'm interested to see what other people are doing as well.
Hey, David here from Brock University. No, we haven't had any of the clubs started yet. We have a few varsity teams started since September. And we were looking into having more varsity teams in the clubs to follow to start training. But once we start with the varsity teams after a few weeks or a couple of months, we noticed the amount of work that our Brock Sports Medicine and Brock Sports Performance staff had during COVID, and it's been so much work that not even other varsity teams have started, right? So yeah, as Allison mentioned, some of our clubs are a little bit perhaps not upset, but they're still inquiring if they can start or not. But and we would like them to have training sessions. But honestly, to tell you the truth is that once a team starts training, then we have to have a lot of follow up with them, and we don't have enough staff. A lot of the coaches are part-time coaches. Some of the coaches are voluntary coaches. And so if in case there's a positive case, there's a huge follow-up, including the coaches. And since the coaches are volunteers, we don't know if they have enough time to do that, right? Some of the things that we're doing with varsity and clubs is the use of social media, right? So they are interacting and posting social media stuff, but other than that, we haven't really had any anything with the clubs, unfortunately.
we've been pretty lucky that our esports group is just crazy involved. And I guess the enormous portfolio I have is good in that I have intramural, sports clubs, aquatics, first aid, and rec programs. And I am able to pull the clubs to say, let's create rec programs within our program and within intramurals. So I'm sort of blending and blurring all the lines within the unit. And we have, I think I've mentioned this in a different call, we have kendo, taekwondo, cheer, esports. I think I had one other one coming on, offering learn to, just come and recreate. It would be like dropping into your local dojo and having a class for free, just like taking a fitness class. So they're offering programs to their members that are more advanced, and then a more of a learn to component with all of our students. Anybody that wants to engage, they're able to participate in those through rec. I don't set anything up. They set it all up. I provide the link. It's great. It promotes their club, but I've been able to do a lot more programming with them than I would if I was trying to do it on my own.
Are those remote, Rebecca? Like
yes,
yeah, they're just like Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I modeled it off of our fitness classes. Art's doing great fitness classes online. We have a monitor that monitors the tech side for trouble, but also making sure nobody's going to Zoom bomb or get in that shouldn't. Then they lead it and we record it. So should there be any questions of what did you teach, was safety covered, we've got it all recorded. So we have a staff component as well as they lead it. It's really on in the background on a second screen. But I get to say to the campus, look how much programming we're offering.
I'm Ryan, by the way, people. I'm from Ryerson, and I'm the competitive clubs coordinator. So we pretty much, yeah, we're on lockdown now. I did have some groups that were participating in person for a little while outside, mostly, and my dance pack had started to do some dance, not in our facilities, but renting out dance studio facilities. Studios. But now we're at, some of them have been just same thing, running Zoom sessions, Zoom training sessions, and they've been distributing like track and field. They bought a package of bands and strength and conditioning equipment, have distributed to their members, and they're running their own training sessions by Zoom. So that's pretty much what's happening. Same thing as Rebecca, like my esports is still running. It's a huge program, so it's going quite well. And yeah, just a few running remotely. Dragon Boat and things like that are still, they'll train remote, but that's about it.
We did have a question from someone on supervision ratios. What are you doing regarding that? And it could be virtual, I suppose, or in person. We can expand on what that meant. Was it for future or for now?
That was my question. So yeah, it was just sort of a risk management type of question for future planning. It was brought up to me like by my director, is this something that has been looked at in terms of like our risk management audit and things like that? And I've tried to find it somewhere, like research online, and I've even reached out to like NCCP and things like that to see if they had any guidelines or suggestions, and no one seems to have anything that I can find. So thought I would put it out to the group if anybody's done that research and found anything in that regards.
What about the Canadian Coaching Association for each sport? I set ours at 25. I do a lot of training and teaching, which is active and in the classroom. And I've done research on how much space and square footage each person needs in a classroom versus in a first aid program. I arrived at 25 is a manageable number for someone to monitor for safety. And so made it standard across the board. Every time you increase it by 25, you're adding another safety officer, a person in charge. Happy to look at more information if anybody is if anybody's interested in that or has more resources. What else are people doing with supervision ratios if this was normal?
No.
Does anybody supervise? Maybe we're asking the wrong question first.
Our club numbers are sorry, I'm having connection issues, so I don't have my video on, but our club sizes are pretty small, so we don't have to really worry a lot about that. Our biggest one is our men's rugby, which has 40, and we have one head coach and 3 assistant coaches present at all practices in that situation. But all of our other clubs usually run between 10 and 15 or 10 and 20, and we have 2 coaches on, so we don't worry as much about our supervision ratios for those ones.
Those of you that have activity, whether prior to your recent closure or change, were you putting staff on in the facility to monitor distancing and sanitizing and anything else? Just let them go to it and hope for the best. Okay, if anybody has any other comments for Ryan on supervision, you can email him or send it in chat. There's also some questions about registration and club fees. Are you charging club fees right now? Are you doing it through your point of sale system? Is it an honor system? If you're not charging, what was your rationale? If you are, that's even a bigger rationale to share with us. Justin, I saw you went unmuted. I still can't hear you.
Hello?
Ah, that's better.
There we go. Sorry about that. I just wanted to jump in at the end there. We do have, to the last point, we work in conjunction with our client service team. So we have some part-time staff monitors that work in client services that do monitor the building and go on a bit of a circuit to enforce those types of protocols. But other than our sort of information booth at the beginning of the entrance of the building when they first walk in, no, we're using the honor system quite a bit for clubs.
Maggie, I saw you nodding when it came to club fees. Are you encountering the same kind of thing?
So we have like our clubs separated into recreational and competitive. I know that on the competitive side that they have had our club athletes register as student athletes and go through all those kinds of logistical pieces. I've been hesitant to do that because I haven't been able to have a conversation with leadership about what they intend financially. Like, I don't know what their expectation is as far as charging fees, and I'm hesitant to have my athletes who are in the recreation side register if that's not clear yet, because I don't want them to get locked into something where they have to pay for a season that they're essentially not really participating in. And on the flip side, I don't know where funding is at as far as, you know, we have some funding available at the end of each year typically. So I am curious to know if folks are having their club participants pay a fee. We're in a bit of a different situation in that none of our clubs have any permission whatsoever to participate in person. And that's going to be the case leading into the winter term as well. We do have some who are participating, doing virtual programming. Lots are focused on fundraising, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, I'm particularly interested in what other universities are doing or what guidance maybe other folks are getting from their leadership, because I haven't had that conversation yet.
Guelph, we are mandating that they can't charge any sort of competition fee. We've structured it such that we're allowing limited club activity at a return to train level, not a return to competition level. So I only have a handful that are able to actually train and follow all protocols. But we mandated that they couldn't charge a competition fee or a coaching fee, but they could charge a nominal fee because there may be some costs. It's an aquatic club, there may be lifeguarding charges or something like that. But we've been trying to keep it as nominal as possible. Our clubs are self-funded, so we don't charge an admin fee anyways. But again, trying to, I guess, open up recreation at all level to the most amount of students on campus, trying to keep those barriers to entry, like a high club fee, trying to keep it down as much as possible.
We're very similar to Justin. Although we don't have the clubs participating in training yet, for instance, our varsity teams, we do prorated fees. So obviously we don't charge for competition, travel, or anything like that. But if they have been using, Brook Sports Performance or Brook Sports Medicine, if they have used virtual training, there's a prorated fee. Now with the clubs, we have a system where all interested students who want to participate in clubs, they register into, and then after, during the season, we charge them for some sort of fee, right? And all the students who register prior, if they register in August, September, we still provide the services in terms of academic services and mental health, and we don't charge any fees for these services. We want them to provide them still those services to not only varsity students but also the club students, and have them still have that interaction with the students in the department.
Sarah, you've been trying to get in here.
Oh, just so anxious to talk. No, not really. At Laurier, we normally collect, I know all schools are a little bit different, but each athlete that's registered in a club, we normally collect a fee depending on whether it's a recreational club or a competitive club that comes directly to the department. It's $35 or $45 normally, in addition to any fees that it would cost the club to operate. So that's to help cover the administrative services of the department. So we did not charge any of those fees and do not intend at this point to charge any fees, but it's tied to the fact that we've been fortunate so far and been able to collect all of our ancillary fees. And so we've made a commitment to student services and to the Students Union and Graduate Students Association that we wouldn't charge any fees. So we're actually not charging for any programs that we run this fall, winter, in person or virtual. So with the exception of personal training, that's like the one. So yeah, so we're not charging any fees for clubs that need to collect fees in order to cover expenses. A couple of our clubs have hired trainers to do virtual training sessions. We're not doing anything in person at this time. We were just working on getting things going, but for those of you who aren't in Ontario, now that our color system has Waterloo Region in red, it put a real damper on things, and we've just decided to put things on hold at least until the new year for any in-person activities. So any clubs that are incurring costs for trainers, instructors, or coaches, then they're able to collect fees from their athletes on a per term basis to compensate for those fees only, nothing extra, no collection of additional fees for the clubs.
There's a question from Justin in the chat. Are you allowing your competitive clubs to compete in virtual competitions? We're getting pressure from our dance and equestrian clubs on this front. Sarah.
And I might actually add, our equestrian club competes in the American circuit, so that's an extra layer of complexity to that one.
Justin, ours was supposed to be joining that same circuit this year, so I got a year reprieve from that. I got put on the, but our equestrian did quote quote compete in one virtual event, but this one they were supposed to be, it was in September, and they were submitting previously recorded footage of their competition, so they were able to submit sort of a best ever or a personal best, and they would judge that in the equestrian. I don't know how you judge equestrian, really, not my, but there was a lot of back and forth because I was trying to understand where this video was coming from, and so we did approve it because they were just pulling old videos. I'm actually thankful that they even asked at all, if I think back on it. And we're getting the same thing from dance, because I know some of the dance competitions from last year have given them a credit and now told them that they can put it towards this year's virtual competition. But they're currently not even dancing together in person to be able to practice to put a video together. So I think January will tell a lot more whether we're going to be able to do any of that.
Right, and we have both a tap pack and a dance pack. And so in the situation of tap, I mean, it's quite easily to socially distance, but dance pack obviously wants consideration where they can actually physically touch one another and yada, yada, yada.
Ironically, our equestrian club decided not to even ratify this year because they're not given access to any barns. So they have chosen not to ratify. I said there's no punishment or detriment to not ratifying. I wish you would, but you don't have to. So they've chosen not to do that. And we have a directive from the university, top echelons of it, saying no competition of any type on any basis for any athletes. Now the esports is a bit different, of course, there's always an exception, but they're not a physical club, but none of the teams, even when they were playing off site, so baseball played off site, they still had to follow all of the university restrictions of numbers. So the area was 50 outside and the university said, nope, 9 athletes, 1 coach. So it worked out to 8 athletes, 1 coach, 1 safety officer. So they still have to follow it, whether they're on our site or off our site, and no competition whatsoever.
I'm in the same boat with no competition. The issue I'm having is, it seems like low-hanging fruit to allow a team to compete in a virtual environment, but I don't think senior admin here really understands the logistical support that comes with that when you start supporting a competitive team. So Allison, you said triathlon, they were permitted to compete virtually. How did that work in terms of what sort of logistical support did you provide them, if any?
Really nothing.
Yeah.
Our triathlon club is very, very independent, so that's helpful. And they're pretty small. So they basically emailed me, they said, can we compete in this? And I said, are you going to be in the same space training or recording your times? No. Yes, you can.
Anybody else have any
They
creative?
recorded their
address
score
it?
and that was entered into this competition, and that was basically how it worked. And it wasn't really triathlon because they weren't allowed to swim.
Any other thoughts on fees? Okay. I had a thought, having been on a number of these sessions, and of course, it's very top of mind as I revise different things, but I was wondering what things you've done or what you're thinking about or ideas for meaningful engagement of BIPOC within your clubs. Ours are arm's length. They're getting a little less arm's length, but I can't really dictate some of these things. So how do I meaningfully engage them and encourage them into the training and discussions and safe space and open dialogue around BIPOC inclusion, whether that's at the executive level or the participant level? I'm wide open to some ideas and thoughts. Has anybody tackled it?
Well, speaking to somebody who's in a department that had a pretty startling review just come out about anti-Black racism, one of the, I guess, outcomes or one of the objectives from that review is to have a student-led committee. So to have it focused primarily on, building racial equity and addressing anti-racism in our department. So the hope too is to have the student leadership committee that we already have in place to take on some of that work as well, so to have students collectively more intentionally think about how they want to deliver on that for themselves. And then as well, our department is mandated to do a bunch of other things as recommended by the review. And that includes, specific diverse hiring, and we're putting together some Black leadership events for our student athletes in the coming months. But I think the idea of having, a student committee who's specifically dedicated to addressing some of that work is probably a good idea. Not that we're doing that right now, but something that we plan to do.
Kevin.
Yeah, Meg, I know you mentioned the student leadership committee or council that you have. I know that is, I wouldn't say fairly common, but there are those at some institutions, whereas there's not that model at others. But I was thinking, with a council like this, has there ever been any sort of discussion about equal representation among the student leaders who are elected to sit on that council or committee, to try to have more diverse voices in the room at the student leadership level? I know that you mentioned like hiring practices, but I'm thinking, next layer down with student leaders as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. I can say with almost certainty that has not been something that's been practiced in our department before, but I would say that that's a great idea. And yeah, hopefully there's a lot more intention around that at every level in our department moving forward. But yeah, that's a good way to go about it for sure.
Anybody else have advisory councils that they're utilizing to address some of these systemic issues? Sarah has worked with CERC in the past, the Student Intramural Recreation Council, and there's a little part of me that likes COVID because I really got to do a lot of admin and revising stuff while I was at home. And one of them is I took the CERC from 6 or 8 reps up to 20. And it's meant to be representative of all those that are involved. I sat with the group and we looked at, there's a representative from our Queer Student Association, from accessibility. We talked about representation in light of the anti-Black and anti-systemic racism reports. And they looked around the table and said, we're good. The group there is extremely diverse. I said, well, I'd really like to formalize something to make sure that doesn't change. I don't see it changing given the population of the campus and the students, but I want to make sure it's a foundational piece and cemented into our constitution that we will continue with the diversity. And it's an active response, it's an active, proactive piece, not, oh, look, we're not representative of the campus. So they were very instrumental in helping ensure that we are representative of our broad campus, including the Black students and students of color.
We just went through, or we're going through this process now. We've done like a 2-day department workshop, and it's been broken down now into a report, and there's an action plan that's started to happen now. I've just pulled it up to remind myself of what some of the things were. So we did the staff workshops. Now they're going to do a student staff workshop, and then they're creating a creating a BIPOC group space, and asking what support and what the ongoing process is going to be. So I'm just reading these notes. And then basically just going to start defining what progress is, like what does accountability look like for us, and what the targets and end goals are. And just so that's short term. In the medium term, they want to drill down and identify issues and opportunities and engage student athletes and student staff, and develop action plans, including quicker wins and longer terms. Is there anything else here? Again, it's mostly, long-term identifying further education that's required, and setting targets and timelines. There's not a lot. There's just sort of still pulling together all the plans and then going to break it down from there. But we're in the process. Maybe in the winter I'll have more.
Okay, I had two more items that were submitted or brought up as items from other sessions. And one of them is around concussions and protocols and how everybody's managing to train, track in our virtual environment. I didn't know if anybody did that MOOC training through Laval and Calgary. It was great. It ends today at 3 o'clock. But it was really beneficial, and it helps you develop a concussion protocol. And I didn't know if anybody has thought of things virtually, or what did you encounter while you were doing virtual activities related to your concussion management? Do you make them still do their concussion training even though they're virtual, or they're not having any competition? Or
We haven't made them do anything right now simply because they aren't allowed to train or compete or do anything. So we haven't put them through that yet. It's something that we'll look at starting once they resume. It'll be part of their return to train program.
And then the other one was the return to activity process. There's lots of demands on our time and our spaces. The prioritizing often comes from on high, but where do your sports clubs fit in, and how are you going to manage the flood of requests once we start being allowed to reopen again?
We
Justin?
just reviewed our facility policy. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we made them go through a formal process of actually putting a proposal together, like an actual return to train plan. We've been pretty creative in finding space. We've been luckily able to find alternatives if there was a conflict. But the key, I guess, takeaway for me was the act of making them go through a return to train plan, which is really a risk management plan by another name. A lot of clubs that thought they would be able to operate in some sort of COVID environment had that self-realization that, you know what, I think we're just going to be a social club right now.
Justin, just to clarify, and if anyone else did this, so you had your like your student leaders, whoever oversees the club operations, come up with their own return to train plan?
No, we had the executives of each club come up with their own return to train plan. So this was a similar exercise that we made the varsity teams do that were led by the head coach, but obviously we don't have that necessarily for all of our competitive teams on the club side. So it was their president or their executive council that developed the plan. Obviously it was scrutinized a little bit more forgivingly than what we'd expect from a full-time head coach, but it was pretty rigorous, and a lot of them, once they started to really dive into a lot of the minimum requirements that we would need them to demonstrate to operate, backed away and said, you know what, this is way too hard for us to do. This is way too much responsibility as a student leader. We're going to be a virtual club, or we're going to be a social club this year.
It was very similar for us. Sorry, it was very similar for us. We understood that if we were giving them instructions, probably they wouldn't really follow them. So we have them to dive into how to create that plan. And just as Justin, once they saw what were the minimum requirements, they decide, okay, I think this is not the time. And then a step further, if you give them sort of like an explanation, what happens if there is a positive COVID case, they were just hands down, we're not going back. Not at all. There's no way we cannot. Yeah, they wouldn't be able to do it. Unfortunately, it's just the amount of work behind that. It was too much.
I'll also add too, we're not penalizing any club for making that decision either. If they want to be on hiatus or pause, whatever you want to call it, we're not taking any sort of punitive measures against a club that doesn't want to be active or certified this semester or next semester.
Were these clubs that were participating on site or on and off site?
So we presented it to them in the sense that if they wanted to book on-site facility time, they would need a return to train plan. So we do have a couple of clubs that they don't have an active presence on campus in our facilities that are still technically active as social clubs. But for us, that was sort of the red line, is if they wanted to be in our spaces, using our facilities, they had to have an approved plan.
If they were off-site, did they have to have an approved plan?
The way we have structured it with clubs is that we are not endorsing or permitting any off-site practice, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
So we were actually the opposite. So not in terms of the plan, we provided, so we had a return to train template plan that my director of sport, like on the varsity side, worked on for varsity, for say soccer. And we used it as a template. And when I had a club that wanted to run anything August, September, whatever it was, I provided them the template. They worked from that and they had to customize it based on them, on what they were doing. And I had like, what did I have? I had Dragon Boat and rugby. Those are the two main ones that were operating basically from August and then training in September and so forth. And it was all off campus. They don't do it. We don't have space on campus at Ryerson. So for us, it was all off campus. And yeah, but it was following the guidelines set out by their this went blank, their sport organization. The Dragon Boat had the paddle, what's it called? OCS, Canada, anyways, and Rugby Ontario. They had their own guidelines. So they had to follow that. They had to put it into their return to train plan and go from there. And we supported them.
In our case, we have a template as well. For off-campus training, it was a little bit concerning for us because when you were having them training on campus, if you have them training on campus, you have sort of control what's happening on campus, right? So you had an added step when if they were training off campus, and you were very dependent on whatever facility, a gym or whatever facility they were on. You were very dependent if they were actually following the protocols, right? So that's a really concern for us if they're training off campus.
Yeah, sorry. For us, like we also had multiple legal documents that our legal department came up with, sign-offs and waivers that we had to include, and then I relied on the supervisors to ensure that they were following and sign off that they were going to follow the certain protocols, including a live Google Doc contact tracing, contract tracking sheet and so forth on site. So it was all outdoors until dance pack had gone into a studio. So it was less of a concern when it was outdoors for us in the August and September. But there was obviously no contact and things like that allowed and so forth. So
that's it's helpful to know what folks have done already, because just thinking about where I imagine things are going to go, I picture that, and this might not be the case for other folks, but there's going to be probably some other iteration of an approval process for clubs when they plan to ratify for next year, right? So imagine it's April or May and clubs are thinking about September and I'm thinking about September, just the expectation, and I don't know if folks have thought that far ahead, but like what's the expectation of what your clubs are able to come up with, you know, for next fall, because I don't know how different it's going to look from how it looks right now. And like a more, another question, I guess, is those approval processes, how far up the chain do they go? Because right now I know that anything that's being approved for our department is going right to the top dog at the university. And I'm just curious to know if that's the same for everybody else.
Yeah, for our case, it goes all the way to the top. It starts with the executives. It goes through me, goes through our Brock Sports management and director, sorry, and it goes all the way to the top. Yeah, there's a Brock COVID committee that approves not only our return to activity to train, but it also oversees all the departments in the university.
Yeah, in Regina, we're in the same boat. It goes through me, and then it goes to I'm part of a department or a faculty, so it goes to our faculty leadership. And from there, it goes to the president's office. And then if the president's office approved, it has to go to our health and wellness group. As Ryan, in that we provide a document of here's the base rules you need to follow, and then they need to provide us with the information from their provincial sport and local sport governing bodies on what they need to do. The one question I have for everybody in regards to that protocol, so we require any of our athletes, so curling, which is kind of interesting, they have to wear a mask at all times, whether they are on the field to play or not. So like our football team, our hockey teams, they all have to have masks even on the ice or on the field. The only exemption that they've made is swimming. Is anybody else requiring masks during competition, or is it just to and from the venue?
In our case, if you're on, if you're training, you don't have to wear a mask. With the teams that we have that have returned, they don't have to wear a mask. But there's one specific team that by provincial sport provision guidelines, they have to wear either a mask or face cover, which is a squash. So in that case, even if the coach, requests this, hey, not wearing mask or face shields, we ask them to do them. But for the rest of the teams that we have right now, even we don't have many of the clubs or other teams, they don't have to wear masks during training sessions. But obviously, there cannot be any contact among them.
Ironically, our legal team decided it's extremely complex, like the rest of you, where it's multi-phased approvals right up to the campus COVID committee. That was so in-depth and detailed, and there's multiple iterations of this committee. So this group would ask a question about this plan, and this one would ask a question about a different plan, but they wouldn't ask the same questions, but they were duplicated. And yet when they were off site, they said, we don't want to know. We just want to know that they're practicing, where they're practicing, and that they have agreed to follow the facility COVID requirements. So baseball, again, because they were one of my most active in the fall, they had to identify that they had written a plan and submitted it to the facility that they were booking, and that they had let me know that they were booking it. The campus did not want to know any more, but it's certainly tight for anything to do on campus in terms of its requirements. And in masks, it's, it changes every time we go into a different color phase. Squash, intramurals, we're going to have to wear face coverings. So it really is weekly what those requirements are changing.
I'll just add, for us, it was the same thing, field of play only for the masks. We didn't mandate it at all times for the ones that were running. But when you talked about the approvals, it was, yeah, my director of sport up to through our EHS department, emergency health and safety. And they were the big approvers. They yes, I believe it went up to the president's office above them to get approval for overall for participation. But then everything that we were running was had to go through EHS approval, and also the waivers and things through legal. So. Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Let's see what everybody's doing in case a positive case within your clubs. What is a protocol that you're following if there's a positive case within your clubs?
We just went through one with our underwater hockey team. We have created at Guelph a daily attestation link that parallels the Ontario self-assessment tool. They're instructed to, so any club participant, if they feel they are a presumptive case or have maybe been exposed, they're supposed to go through that questionnaire. And that actually triages to student health services on campus, which then connects with public health. So that is the direction. We discourage them from coming to, like myself in my role, or to a staff member. It still happens because you have that personal relationship generally with the club executives and coaches, but that's what they've been officially told to do. And then public health, we take the direction at that point in terms of any contact tracing or anything like that. So in our case of our underwater hockey club, they did come to me as well, again, because we have that relationship, and I directed them to do the daily attestation link. The one thing, and we've done training on this several times, but I guess it didn't really hit home for this group, is that the club president then took it upon themselves to start doing contact tracing. So we discourage that. And again, we asked that the individual contact, do their daily attestation link, and then through contact tracing would be contacted through public health. So I think their heart was in the right place, but we discouraged that club president from doing that.
Well, it's 10:02. I know that today was Justin had to leave us at 1:45. David, sorry. Are there any other topics or issues related to your sports clubs? To me, this is so valuable. Our sports clubs are really different than the American version. And although we're different across the board, across the country, we still have some really fundamental pieces that are Canadian in how we operate our clubs. So I find this really beneficial to be able to bounce ideas off of and not feel, alone in how I'm approaching clubs.
I just had one thing I wanted to add. I think it was mentioned when we first started the call. In lieu of that freedom to obviously train and compete, what are some creative ways we've been trying to engage clubs? We obviously have a training plan that we go through for all club executives, but I've been developing more of these town hall series that focus around more common themes. So financial management, risk management, marketing, promotion, and fundraising. And they've been generally well received. And for us, that's something that we can say is continuing their experiential learning through a leadership development series. So they've been well received. And we're looking at a couple different ideas for the winter semester, but I think something like a leadership academy or something like that. We're going to put together a town hall for that. So again, it still engages the club executives. It's a bit of experiential learning and some training in some key areas that they need to be successful in their club role, their club president role. And again, we can do it all virtually, which is nice. So that's just one of the ways that we've engaged a lot of club presidents more.
That's great ideas. Thanks, Justin. Well, I will not belabor it. It was wonderful to see everybody, and thank you all for joining. If everybody has any questions, and I'm sure we can reach out to each other once again, and I'll encourage Sarah to continue to set us up as our own independent NIRSA sessions and not lump us in with other sports or activities or packages. So I really appreciate your time. It is being recorded, so if you have a colleague or yourself want to go back through it, it will be posted to the NIRSA YouTube site. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you. Take care. Stay safe.
Bye, everyone.